Who is Danny Brom?
My name is Danny Brom, and I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been working in the field of trauma since 1979, first in Holland and then since 1988 in Israel. What do I like? What I like in life besides the work I'm doing is music, listening to music. I like my children a lot, and now also my grandchildren. They are very fulfilling. I started psychology basically because of what I saw that my parents did. My parents, after the Holocaust, started to work with children who came out of the camps or of hiding, and they gave up their careers in order to work with children, child Holocaust survivors. And I became interested in trauma to see how do people cope, because a lot of people cope very well with it. They build new lives, and it doesn't mean they don't suffer, but I saw in the communities I grew up in and the so-called children that my parents helped after the war, that you can live, and that you can live a fulfilling life also after having gone through horrible things. Resilience. Resilience is a concept that came up in the 1970s, when we started to see that many people, after going through trauma, do not develop psychopathology or difficulties, but they can cope with it. So since then there's more and more research to understand how that works, what makes people resilient, how can they cope with horrible things and still feel okay. So we know now that that is a concept that doesn't give us enough clarity. People who are optimistic are more resilient. People who have a lot of support in their environment are more resilient. And people who know how to regulate their emotions and regulate their bodies, they are more resilient. So there's a whole lot of different things that make people resilient. It is very natural for people, after they've gone through trauma, to try and forget. That is both on the individual level, but also on a community level. People want to forget about it, put it aside, and go on with their lives. When people totally avoid their memories, it becomes problematic. Then people who do that can develop post-traumatic stress disorder or depression. That is a problem. In the world there's lots of wars and lots of violence and lots of trauma. So we do need to find the means to help people cope with it in order to have their full range of emotions and have the liberty to speak about what they need to speak about. I've been to Mexico several times, and I know that also in Mexico there is a lot of violence, a lot of fear, and people need to know how to help each other so that the society can remain an open society. Because when you live in fear, you try to close up and you try to live in very small closed communities and see everyone else as an enemy. And I think it's really a privilege to come to a community and help them see what is actually happening and how do they react and how can they take care of themselves. I don't know a lot about Mexican society, But what I've seen is it's a very vibrant society, very alive, and there's a lot of resilience also in Mexico. So people do need to learn also how to help those who are less resilient. People are afraid of talking about everything that happens and their fears. But when you allow that to happen, society can benefit from it and remain resilient as a whole society. We have been active as a trauma center in many different ways, sometimes immediately after a disaster, like in Haiti after the earthquake, tsunami. So that's one part. The other part is that we work together with many different countries to share knowledge. It's not that we have all the knowledge. We need to develop much more knowledge on how on what resilience exactly is, how we can promote it, and how we can help people who are in post-traumatic stress disorder in the best way. At the trauma center here in Jerusalem, we try to share our knowledge by training, by writing articles and books, and by learning ourselves. We every year have an international summer course where people come for 2 or 3 weeks, and we feel that we learn because you always need to learn more about different cultures and how they cope with trauma. What I like most in my profession is individual therapy. It's a privilege when someone who has gone through hell trusts you enough to open up, and you see them growing from this experience, and that is a very fulfilling experience for me.